Michael Schumacher is a man who needs little introduction. Considered by many to be the greatest driver of all time, and with an exceptional ability to build a team up from the inside, Schumacher's record tally of wins stood for 19 years until it was finally eclipsed long after he had finished racing. At the time of this recording, he has the joint most world championships in history, although is unfortunately confined to his home in Switzerland due to a serious skiing accident over a decade ago. Since then, the hashtag #KeepFightingMichael has trended several times, and has even appeared on Formula One cars as the teams continue to show their support for the popular world champion. In this video, I will be delving into some of his greatest wins and successes, including some that you might not have heard of. It's worth mentioning that I've had to keep this list to a maximum of one race per year, because, as I'm sure you can understand, trying to slice a 37-year career containing 91 wins down to just 15 is not easy at all, and inevitably some incredible drives are going to get missed. So without further ado, let's delve into 15 times when Schumi got the zoomies. Title a work in progress. Beginning in karts at the age of just 4, Schumacher's karting record contains more gold than a royal palace, so it's no surprise that he was able to progress to cars in 1988. His first success came immediately, winning the German Formula Koenig Championship with a 100% podium record and a 90% win rate. He then moved to German Formula 3 in 1989, coming third, but he tried again in 1990 and won it. It was also this year when he first became involved with Mercedes-Benz, getting race outings in both DTM and the World Sports Car Championship, although the less said about that DTM race the better. However, no Formula 3 race matches the prestige of the Macau Grand Prix, and this is where Michael found himself fighting with a future rival, Mika Häkkinen. After Häkkinen won the first leg, he was unable to keep the lead from Schumacher, who passed him. Häkkinen stuck with him though, and on the final lap he made his move, but disaster struck and he crashed out hard! Watching the replay, you can see that Schumacher actually begins his defensive move before Häkkinen jinks out, which in my opinion makes this completely fair from Michael, if a little on the rough side. But even though Häkkinen was out, it wasn't yet over for Schumacher, who then had to finish the whole of the rest of the lap with no rear wing. The car must have been twitching something awful as Schumacher navigated the tight confines of the Ghia circuit, but somehow he brought it home to win the Macau Grand Prix ahead of Mika Salo and Eddie Irvine. Little did anyone know that these three would end up being Ferrari's lineup in 1999, and that they would once again come up against Mika Häkkinen for a victory, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. After this success, it was off to the World Sports Car Championship for a full campaign, but when Jordan F1 driver Bertrand Gachot was famously jailed for assault, Mercedes paid for Michael to go to F1. 1991 was Jordan's first year in F1, so they were still finding their feet, but Michael showed them just what their car could do with the right driver by qualifying 7th on his debut. At the time, this was Jordan's joint best ever qualifying position, and he was a remarkable 0.7 of a second faster than his experienced teammate Andrea De Cesaris. Unfortunately, the race didn't go his way, and he didn't even complete a lap before his clutch failed, but he'd already done enough to make his mark, and so Benetton controversially snatched him up for the very next race, much to Jordan's dismay. Schumacher drove the rest of the season with Benetton, scoring his first points with a 5th place finish in Italy, a future happy hunting ground for him. Spa-Francorchamps would also prove to be a happy hunting ground for Schumi, and 1 year after his debut he was already able to take his first win. He'd been on the podium 5 times by this point and had qualified 3rd for the race, but on lap 29 it looked to be going wrong as Schumacher slid off the road. He then pitted for slick tyres, feeling that he might as well, but this turned out to be an inspired decision as he ended up jumping the field. Driving on a drying track with very little margin for error, Schumacher came home to win by nearly 37 seconds ahead of the dominant Williamses of Mansell and Patrese. It was clear that it would be the first of many, but I'm not sure anyone really knew just how many he'd end up with. So, as I said at the start of this video, I will only be including a maximum of one race per year. I decided not to include any from 1993, despite a strong season, but you might be surprised to hear that I also won't be including any from his first World Championship victory in '94. This is because of the events of Australia '94, which I consider to be cheating, plain and simple. After making a mistake and hitting the wall, Michael saw his hopes of a first World Championship slipping away and decided to take drastic action, shutting the door on Hill and deliberately taking them both out of the race. While it's true that Schumacher pulled off some fantastic drives in '94, I think this incident overshadows it, as does the question of whether his car was even legal in the first place, what with the alleged traction control and illegal pit lane refueling rig. As much as I respect Michael for what he achieved, I can't consciously put any races from '94 onto this list. On to the next one. Returning to Spa-Francorchamps for the third time in a row on this list, Schumacher found himself with a mountain to climb. Qualifying had been a wet-dry affair, and Schumi found himself down in 16th place on the grid. Not that it mattered though, because by lap 6 he had already gained 11 places, and after that it was as simple as passing Irvine, jumping everyone else in the pits, and then winning a tremendous scrap with Hill that nearly took them both out several times. Of course, Hill and Schumacher actually did come together that year in both Silverstone and Monza, but that didn't stop Schumacher from going on to win the championship, wrapping it up 2 races early at the Pacific Grand Prix. Making a fabled move to Ferrari for 1996, Schumacher pulled off what many old-school fans will tell you was his greatest ever drive, in the pouring rain in Spain. 7 rounds into the championship, it was clear that the Ferrari would not be able to regularly compete with the Williamses at the front, but this wasn't factoring in Schumacher's Rainmeister status. As you saw, he didn't even get a good start, but once again overtaking came easy as he scythed his way past Alesi and Villeneuve in exactly the same way. But what of his rival Hill, I hear you ask? Well, he was in the wall, having spun several times and dropped down the field. Schumacher went on to take his first victory for Ferrari, finishing 45 seconds ahead of the field and lapping all but the podium. He went on to finish third in the championship that year, losing the crown but still being best of the rest behind the Williamses. Halfway through the '97 season, Schumacher was back at the front of the championship, once again fighting with the Williamses for the crown. At the French Grand Prix, a late shower caught out several drivers and caused chaos on the track, but as we know by now, any time it begins to rain, that benefits Schumacher, who won by 24 seconds from Frentzen in a Grand Slam victory. The rest of the year was all about the battle for supremacy between Schumacher and Williams' Jacques Villeneuve, although this too ended in controversy when Michael deliberately hit Villeneuve's car at the European Grand Prix and was ultimately disqualified from the whole championship. In my opinion, it's incidents like this that stop Michael from being the greatest driver of all time, and it's such a shame that such an incredible career has been marred by dirty driving such as this. If there's one Grand Prix that Ferrari drivers want to win more than any other, it's the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Schumacher had already pulled this off once for Ferrari in 1996, but in 1998 it was arguably his best achievement of the year, as he once again had to recover from a subpar start. On lap 16, race leader Coulthard's engine expired in a dramatic way, and at the same time Schumacher made his move on Häkkinen. Mika defended, but ran wide at the chicane and Michael was able to cut back underneath him. The lead changed twice in the space of 3 corners, and Schumacher went on to win the race by a dominant 38 seconds. What's more, Häkkinen began to struggle with his brakes and he was passed by Eddie Irvine, and so the Tifosi went wild for what was the first Ferrari 1-2 at Monza for 10 years. Schumacher ended up second in the championship, losing the title in a Suzuka showdown. While it's often said that Michael was the best number 1 driver Ferrari has ever had, he was also the best number 2. Let me explain. In 1999, Schumacher looked likely to win the World Championship until this horrendous brake failure at Silverstone left him with a broken leg. By the time he returned to the championship, Ferrari had put all of their support behind Eddie Irvine, who could still have won the title. In Michael's first race back, which was Sepang, he took pole position by 9/10 of a second, as if to show that he never really left at all. He could easily have gone on to dominate this race, but instead he dropped back behind Irvine and played rear gunner, fending off the McLarens and dutifully helping Irvine to his 4th win of the season. Considering how many times Michael's teammates had to concede wins to him, it's nice to see that sometimes, just sometimes, he was gracious enough to wear the shoe on the other foot. It all ended up being for naught, however, as Häkkinen won the Japanese Grand Prix and thus the championship by just 2 points. Michael ended up 5th despite missing 6 Grand Prix. For the year 2000, Michael switched to his famous red helmet, and Monza once again turned red for him. Under heavy pressure from Häkkinen, Michael pushed hard and survived a hectic safety car restart before eventually coming home first. After the race, Michael broke down into tears as he was asked how it felt to have equalled Ayrton Senna's tally of 41 wins, and he said that he'd given this race absolutely everything he had. Sadly, there was no Ferrari 1-2 this time, as Rubens Barrichello was involved in a crash on the first lap, and even sadder was that the accident claimed the life of a marshal, Paolo Gislimberti. Michael then went on a 6-race winning streak, winning the World Championship by 19 points over Häkkinen. It was his third World Championship and his first for the prancing horse. The 2001 season started in dramatic fashion as Schumacher had this spectacular crash in practice in Australia. Most people would at least be somewhat perturbed by this, but not Schumi, who took his rebuilt car to a brilliant pole position where he was nearly 0.4 of a second faster than anyone else. The race itself was chaotic and full of incidents, but not for Schumacher, who claimed a Grand Slam, meaning he also took the fastest lap as he won from pole position. Notably, this race saw the debut of several young talents who would hound Michael hard over the next few seasons, including future champions Fernando Alonso and Kimi Räikkönen. Tragically, this race also saw the death of a marshal, Graham Beveridge, who was hit by a tyre after Michael's brother Ralph collided with Jacques Villeneuve. As for the rest of the season, Schumi was utterly dominant as he finished on the podium in all but 3 races, almost doubling the points tally of David Coulthard, who came second. This was the height of what many remember as the Schumacher era, where every race weekend felt like Michael versus the field, with the odds heavily stacked in Michael's favour. Anyone who thought 2001 was dominant was in for a shock in 2002, as Schumacher did manage to achieve a 100% podium record, winning a then record 11 races and scoring exactly double the points of his teammate in the dominant Ferraris. Talking of dominance, one of the hardest things to achieve in F1 is a Grand Chelem, where a driver takes pole position, fastest lap, and leads every single lap of the Grand Prix on the way to their victory, which is exactly what Schumacher did at the 2002 Spanish Grand Prix. In qualifying, he was 0.3 of a second faster than his teammate in second, and 0.9 of a second faster than his brother in third, and by the time the race was over, he was an awe-inspiring 36 seconds clear of the field. I know people like to say that F1 is predictable, but hey, at least it's not 2002 anymore. Schumacher wrapped up the championship as early as July, a record that will probably, and hopefully, never be beaten. Luckily for the sport, 2003 was a much closer affair, as young challengers Kimi Räikkönen and Juan Pablo Montoya both found themselves able to challenge Schumacher much more frequently. Coming into the Italian Grand Prix, Schumacher was actually on a 5-race losing streak for the first time in 3 years, and the top 3 in the championship were separated by just 2 points. At Monza though, his resurgence began, and despite some early pressure from Montoya, he took another Grand Slam victory in front of the enthralled Tifosi. A fun fact about this race is that it was actually the fastest Grand Prix ever run up until that point, with an average winning speed of 154 miles per hour. This record stood right up until 2025. As for the rest of 2003, Kimi Räikkönen kept the pressure on right up until the final round at Suzuka, where a win for Barrichello gave Schumacher the championship by just 2 points. Michael now had a record 6 World Championships, surpassing the previous record of 5 set by the great Juan Manuel Fangio. While 2003 was a close fight, 2004 was anything but, as Ferrari produced their greatest car of all time, the F2004. At the first race of the season, the Australian Grand Prix, Schumacher set the tone for the rest of the year with a Grand Chelem, his 4th of an eventual 5 such achievements. He looked unbelievably comfortable in his car all weekend, winning by 14 seconds and never putting a wheel wrong. He went on to dominate the championship, extending his title record to 7, and without an unfortunate crash in Monaco, he could have won 13 races in a row. His record of 13 wins in a season was unmatched until 2013 and not beaten until 2022, and his record of 7 World Championships was unmatched until 2020 and is yet to be beaten. You'll notice that I skipped 2005, which is the year when the controversial tyre rules destroyed Ferrari's pace and left Michael driving somewhat dejectedly, with his only win coming at the farcical US Grand Prix. In 2006, however, Michael was back in form and driving as well as ever, but unfortunately for him, so was Fernando Alonso. A sensational championship fight was the result, with Michael and Fernando winning 7 races each, and with the championship coming down to the very last round in Brazil. As you can see by this footage from the French Grand Prix, they sometimes even tussled in qualifying, fighting each other for track position as if it was the first lap of a Grand Prix. On this occasion though, it was Schumacher who would take the victory on a day that positively reeked of his former glory days. The result was another Grand Slam victory by over 10 seconds from Fernando, where he appeared unchallenged for the whole race. In the championship though, it was Fernando who had the last laugh, winning the championship by 13 points. Michael Schumacher retired, bringing an end to a remarkable career. Except it wasn't the end, as in 2010 Michael unretired and returned to Mercedes after all those years away. And while he clearly wasn't quite the driver he used to be, and he was actually beaten by his teammate Nico Rosberg, he still showed occasional glimpses of brilliance. At the Monaco Grand Prix in 2012, the old-timer showed the newbies how it was done as he threaded his car between the barriers, setting the fastest lap in qualifying and taking what should have been his final pole position. Unfortunately though, he had a grid penalty hanging over him after a crash at the previous race, and so he started from 6th position before eventually retiring from the race with a fuel pressure issue. He finished his career with 7 World Championships, 68 pole positions, 91 wins, and a staggering 155 podiums. Thank you all for watching this video, and to Michael, keep fighting.